Hey everyone, welcome to the channel, and today I've got some records to show you. These were purchased from 2 car boot sales, and I've also got one record to show you which came from a charity shop. First up, the Moody Blues, To Our Children's Children, and it comes in a gatefold sleeve. And this was £3 and at a car boot sale, and it's the first release that the Moody Blues put out on their own Threshold label, and it was their 5th album. It's a concept album of sorts which was inspired by the moon landings that took place in July '69. I think it's an album that works best with the band at full pelt, everything swathed in mellotron, and Justin Hayward's vocals trying to reach for the stars. And next, this was a really good buy. I got this for £1, can't quite believe it. It's an original mono pressing of Blood, Sweat and Tears, Johnny Cash, which came out in 1963, and it's a beautifully clean mono pressing, as I say. Most of side 1 is taken up with the 8-minute plus track The Legend of John Henry's Hammer. And there's also some interesting country cover versions. I particularly like the old Jimmy Rogers track, Waiting for a Train. And next up, this is called Mersey Survivors, various artist compilation, and at first glance it probably looks like it's a budget label and doesn't have a lot to recommend it, but if you dig a bit deeper, it's a record that's of real interest to me, and although it's not that collectible, I don't think. I got this for £2.50 at a car boot sale, and what makes it interesting is that it's on the Raw label. This was a punk record label that was set up by Lee Wood, who used to run a record shop called Remember Those Oldies, which I used to frequent, and I still reckon it's the best record shop that I've ever been to in my life. The Raw label was started by Lee Wood in 1977 when he put out a single by the punk band called The Users, and the track Sick of You, and he went on to release a number of interesting records. The first record by the Soft Boys, Waiting for a Ventilator, that came out on the label, and the Killjoys, Johnny Won't Get to Heaven, which included Kevin Rowland on lead vocals, and this was way before Dexy's Midnight Runners. He reissued The Creation Making Time in a picture sleeve, and also reissued You Really Got Me by the Hammersmith Gorillas. And the Gorillas, led by Jesse Hector, of course, then signed to Raw and did a fantastic album on the label, Message to the World. As it says on the front here, a look at Merseybeat 15 years on. So Merseybeat survivors such as Farron's Flamingos, the Dimensions, the Renegades went into the studio to record some new tracks, and he even managed to get Bob Wooler, who was the resident DJ at the Cavern Club in the early 60s, to do an introduction to the album as well. So I'm quite pleased to pick this up. You do see multiple copies for sale on Discogs at not an inflated price at all, but I think because it's on Raw Records, it's a record I have been looking for a number of years, so I'm very happy to have this. Next up, this was the charity shop purchase. I think I paid £4 or £4.50 for this. Lloyd Cole and the Commotions and Rattlesnakes, very boring sleeve, I'm afraid. The inner sleeve's a little bit better. It's got a nice photo of the band. This was a record you don't see too often in near mint condition, so I was quite happy to pay slightly more than I normally would in a charity shop for this. Of course, he was ripping off Lou Reed, but thinking about it, he was actually doing Lou Reed better than Lou Reed was in the 80s, and so I think this is a record that's aged quite well. Right, next up we've got a 12-inch single. I got this for a couple of quid at a different car boot sale, one that I've only been to the once. Guana Bat's Psycho Billy Band, which was a sort of 80s phenomenon of rockabilly bands that sort of played with a punk intensity, usually with an influence from the Cramps as well. One of the B-sides, Batman's a bit of fun. It's the TV theme from the 60s, recorded live. The A-side See-Through is okay. It did chart in the indie charts here in the UK at the time, as they were quite big for a while. But it's not a record I particularly rave about, but I suppose for 2 quid I was happy to pick it up. And this is a record that's far more to my taste. We Got a Party, The Best of Ron Records, Volume 1. Now this was £2.50 at a car boot sale. It's a compilation that was put out in 1988 by the Sequel label, and the tracks were licensed from Rounder in America. Ron Records was a short-lived New Orleans-based label that lasted from 1958 to 1962. They only managed to put out 28 singles, but they had some really great artists on the label, including Professor Longhair, who's represented here by Go to the Mardi Gras, the fantastic Irma Thomas with Don't Mess With My Man, and there's also a couple of early tracks by Robert Parker of Barefooting fame. And you get some nice liner notes on the back as well. And I was lucky to pick up at the same time, for the same price, £2.50, Carnival Time, The Best of Rick Records, Volume 1. At the same time as Ron Records was in operation from 1958 to 1962. Rick was also in operation. Both labels were run by Joe Ruffino, who was a New Orleans businessman. Rick managed to release 43 singles and 1 album in that 4-year period, and including tracks by New Orleans heavyweights such as Tommy Ridgely, Eddie Bow, and Johnny Adams. And that's the details of the lineup. And next, this was a budget-priced reissue of Roberta Flack's first 2 albums that was put out by Atlantic in the 70s. I'll just show you inside. And it's in immaculate condition. She was, of course, a beautiful interpreter of beautiful songs. So I'm thinking here in particular on the first album of Ewan McColl's heartfelt song to his wife, Peggy Seeger, The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face. And she really imbues it with beautiful understated vocals and raw emotion as well. She's a great interpreter of other writers, and other artists covered include Leonard Cohen, Jim Webb, Bob Dylan, Buffy Sainte-Marie, and of course Donny Hathaway. Next up, a 1979 album by Average White Band, which is called Feel No Fret. That's the inner sleeve. Details on the back. This was obviously a later album, so I suppose they were past their peak at this point, but instrumentally it's still an excellent album. I just think they needed a stronger lead vocalist, and if you look at the credits for backing vocalists, you find that Luther Vandross is hidden away there amongst the credits. Just imagine if they'd stuck him centre stage and had him fronting these songs. It may well have been a far more successful record. And next up, an artist who's a favourite of mine, Gerry Rafferty, and think this came out in 1979 as well. This was £2 at a car boot sale. And like the Average White Band, he's another artist that had an extraordinary career beyond the couple of hits that tend to get played forever on the Greatest Hits radio. These are beautifully arranged and produced tracks as always, and with some stunning backing vocals provided by Gerry Rafferty, and which help lift these songs to another level. He's also got some great musicians backing him. So, for example, the great session bassist Mo Foster's on there. You've got some brilliant slide guitar from Bryn Howarth. Organist Pete Wingfield is on there. Also guitarist Jerry Donahue, saxophonist Raphael Ravenscroft. And it also includes one of my very favourite Gerry Rafferty tracks, which I find incredibly moving, The Garden of England, which it's worth checking out if you've not heard that one before. Right, I picked this one up on CD 2 or 3 months ago. I think I've shown that, but this is the Everly Brothers self-titled album that came out in the mid-80s when they reformed, and it was produced by Dave Edmunds. And Dave Edmunds, I think, managed to get most of his mates together to provide the backing on this album. So you've got Albert Lee on guitar, Terry Williams and Jerry Conway supplying drums. Paul McCartney supplies guitar on the song On the Wings of a Nightingale, which he wrote specially for the Everly Brothers. And this was a triumphant return by the band, and it feels both contemporary to the 1980s and timeless at the same time. This was an interesting buy. Jack Clement, All I Want to Do in My Life. And that's the back. I picked this up because I vaguely recognised the name Jack Clement, who had connections with Sun Studios, and having checked since, it turns out that this was his only album, which was put out by Elektra in 1978, and I think Elektra still has the coolest looking record label ever, with that lovely butterfly design. You know the one I mean. Yeah, so it's a nice mix of Jack Clement originals. In fact, I would have liked more of his original songs, because I think he's noted mainly as a songwriter, but he's also found space for covers by some really brilliant country songwriters. So people like Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson, Billy Joe Shaver, John Prine, and it was in immaculate unplayed condition when I bought it as well. So yeah, that was a nice buy. And that's it for now. I'm not finding that many records at car boot sales, but hopefully I'll have enough together soon to show you some more. And that's it for today then. So all the best.